how to handle uncertainty and embrace change. You have to kind of like grieve who you thought you were or who you knew yourself to be at that moment. Instead of attaching our identities to a certain pursuit, try to attach your identity to the features of that pursuit. Welcome back to another episode. It's your host HANAKATT. This is BULGOGI pod. Should I move this shit? How we doing, y'all? How we feeling? I feel like I'm defrosting. I don't know if you guys feel this sentiment, but genuinely throughout the entire wintertime, did not go out, did not like stay up super late. Like, I feel like it's just been a season of like staying in, reading. I am a part of the group of girlies who got a Kindle, and all I want to do now is go home, sit on the couch, or like sit in my bed and read. So if you guys are reading HANAKATT, which I literally just learned is the acronym for A Court of Thorns and Roses, or the Fourth Wing series, then let your girl know, because I need to chit chat with somebody about it. But what's been happening this week? We had two very interesting occurrences. So I ran into two super people this week. Number one, ran into the guy that I used to talk to. It was actually like just a crazy situation because I have yet to like run into an ex. Like, I think it's happened once before, and it like was at my gym, and I was like, oh god, like literally of course it would be at the one place that's like my safe space and like sanctuary and like where I can just like go and talk to nobody, and he had to ruin that. But it's okay, I think he stopped going to this gym. But I ran into the most recent guy that I was talking to, and so this was the first time post our little discussion. And so what happened? Would I say that we ended amicably? Sure. Would I say that we ended well? Maybe not. And so essentially me and my friend Jenny were getting lunch at Open Market. If you guys have been to the location in Koreatown, I'm acting like they have multiple locations. They have one location. But we were just going to get sandwiches, just do a little chit chat, a little catch up. Because you guys know Jenny, she's been on the podcast before. Essentially, we walked in and like, you know, like when you like feel someone, that's exactly what happened. And so I literally like, okay, well, I like saw him and I felt him. I feel like Karen from Mean Girls, but there was a 60% chance that I saw him first. And then I was like, oh my God, he's here, right? And so me and Jenny are walking in together. Also, thank goodness, I like happened to run into Jenny in the garage, and so we came up together. But it was only because I like had left something in my car, so I went back to go grab it, that I ran into Jenny. But had that not happened, I literally would have walked into the establishment alone, which I think would have been like the worst possible situation. But anyways, so I walk in, I literally like see him. He's probably like 7 feet away. Like, we were not very far from each other. And then Jenny is like walking to my right. This guy is on the left. So we walk up to the counter, and then Jenny's like, la-di-da, like, what should I order? And then literally I'm having a panic attack. And so I like turned to her and I'm like, Jenny, I can't breathe. And she was like, what? Like, so confused because she like doesn't have any context, right? And I was like, the guy that I used to see is here. And she was like, oh god. And so we end up ordering. She's like, where should we sit? And so we decide to sit outside, which means I have to pass him one more time. But thank goodness Jenny is like 5'8". Maybe she's 5'7", but I feel like she's 5'8", and like was literally covering me as we walked by. But I just like, it just got me thinking, like, what the frick are you supposed to do when you like run into somebody that you used to talk to or see? Like, I feel like in the past I would have probably prepared and been like, if I run into an ex, like, this is how I'm gonna react. But for some reason for this one, like I I think it's good in ways because I like stopped thinking about him. So I stopped even like considering the fact that like I could possibly run into him when we literally live like basically in the same city, you know, like the same area. And so I like forgot that I could run into him. Like I just did not think that was a possibility. Also because like I had never heard him speak about open market, right? Like I've been going to open market, and so you would think that it would be like brought up at some I don't know, like when discussing sandwiches. Cuz if you guys know, like I'll go through my like hyperfixations of like food specifically, and so I tend to hyperfixate on sandwiches at least like a few times a year. And so I think that's happening right now, but now I'm like, "Oh, I could go one of two ways, right? I could like shy away and like not go to open market in fear that like I might run into him, or the option I'm leaning towards is I go so often that the entire staff know me and I stand my ground and I stake claim on my place. If you guys want to come hang, I might be at open market, but aside from that, the second person that I ran into was one of my was my ex's brother. And so I have not seen him since we broke up. And so I went to an event for Yuzu, which is the new like Asian dating app, and ran into him outside, right? And like so we decided to like walk into the event. Oh, there's my neighbor. What is he doing? Guys, he's literally he's literally looking at my car. He was looking at my car and then freaked out that I was in here. Oh my god. Well, good to know that my windows are nice and tinted. Dude, my neighbors are having a party outside. What's going on? Should I join them? So freaking funny. Okay, let's continue the story. But, so I see my ex's brother outside of this Yuzu event, and like we're like friendly, right? And so I was like, oh hey, like what's up? He's like, hey, like long time no see, like we're just like kind of catching up, like oh what are you up to, whatever. He's like, why are you here? And I was like, oh, I'm here for the Yuzu event. And he was like, oh, me too. And so we walk in and like we get caught up at the door because like I have to like download the app. I like have yet to use it, so if you guys use it, like please let me know what your thoughts are down below, because I feel like there was an Asian dating app, but I don't really remember if that was like good. Like I didn't really use it. Like I don't want to like speak on things that like I personally don't use. And so yeah, let me know about Yuzu. But we like download the app and then we're like walking in, and then he runs into people that he knows, right? So he's like, oh, hey, like, whatever. He's like, this is Hannah. And so, I meet some friends of friends. And then, like, got real freaking awkward when one of the girls that he introduced me to was like, oh, are you two? And I was like, oh, I can understand why you think we're together because we walked in together. But unfortunately, that is not the situation. And literally, my ex's brother goes, oh my god, no. Like, she used to date my brother. And so, started off the night real strong. But yeah, on the real though, like, it was a fun night. Me and the girlies just, like, hung out at the photo booth, and then also got to meet one of you Kogis. And so I don't know why I've just been like recognizing people, and so I like went up to this girl and I was like, hey, like I feel like we've met before. And then she was like, oh no, we haven't. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm Hannah. And she's like, oh my god, I like listened to your podcast. And so shout out Christine. She said she's been listening since like day one, and so she's an OG Kogi. And so it was really nice meeting you. And so yeah, 2 meetups with things involving my exes this past week, which don't know what's in the stars, don't know what's going on in the solars, but something is happening. something is definitely happening. So it's just been a kind of weird week for me, which brought me to this topic, which I wanted to talk about how to handle uncertainty and embrace change. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is just coming up because obviously we learn and change and grow as dynamic human beings, but I think that oftentimes we forget that change can be hard because it can be like a loss of identity. And so, what I mean by this is like, when we introduce ourselves to people, like, I think some of the first things that I go to is like, oh, hi, like, I'm Hannah. I'm from LA. I am working at this place in this job. And like, maybe I'm in a relationship with this person. But all of those descriptors are things that can change in the future and aren't like necessarily a stable part of your identity. And so I think that when, let's say, you get laid off from a job, or let's say you get out of a relationship, that there's like this like sense of like, oh, I'm like losing a part of myself. Like you have to kind of like grieve who you thought you were or who you knew yourself to be at that moment. I also think it's important to remember that we as humans don't like uncertainty. Like, right? Biologically, it just kind of makes sense that we wouldn't like uncertainty. Because if you think about it, right? If we're like foraging for things and I like don't know if a certain berry is gonna kill me, then like I'm uncertain about it. And so like how would that be good for our evolution process, right? Again, as a continuation from last week's episode, this is like actually like a type of conflict is uncertainty, right? Because if we don't know what's going to happen and our survival is at stake, then like, yeah, I'm gonna fight someone or like I'm going to like do my best to like get out of the situation. And so I think like reminding ourselves that change is a process and it's going to take time is just something to like keep in mind, because I think oftentimes like, right, let's use the relationship example. If I get out of a relationship and I had been telling people about my relationship, if I had posted on Instagram, and like if I like truly like, saw this person in my like long-term future and like that changes up real quick, it's gonna take time to like tell people. First of all, it's gonna take time for like you to believe it, and it's just gonna take time for you to like build a new identity around this person that like is you and like will never leave you. And I think it's interesting because people actually have like different predispositions in terms of like attitude. And so if you tend to be a bit more optimistic and open-minded, then change actually comes better for you, which like, right, that makes sense. But for those people who, are a little bit more worrisome and like to be overprepared in situations, change can actually come very difficultly, which, right, that makes sense. But what do we do to work on that issue? What do we do to help embrace the change and uncertainty that is life? Because I'm sure you guys know life truly does not go as planned, as proven by the state of our world. And I think there has to be some like mental agility and just like mental flexibility that goes on in order to just like survive our day to day and like the big life changes that happen, right? I think for me, one of the biggest like life changes that happened kind of recently was like I really wanted to move to Korea. I have not talked about this on the podcast, and until now. But I was like kind of like set on going, y'all. Like literally applied to school out there and was like fully prepared to move. Like I feel like I was kind of like disengaging with like activities at church because I was like, oh, I don't want to get too involved because like I'm gonna leave. Or like even like seeing my like friends, like I feel like I was giving a little bit more of an effort, though I should be doing that all the time regardless of whether or not I'm gonna move. But I just feel like I was like mentally preparing and like preparing the people around me a little bit. But Korea and the school thing like didn't work out, and so I felt slash like feel like I had to adjust quite a bit, in that my entire like life was like set around moving. Like not only like my mindset, but like career trajectory and like social trajectory and like all of that. Like I was like very on the path of like moving to Korea, and like now that like that is not happening, at least in this season of my life, it's like having to like readjust and be like, okay, now that this is not happening, like firstly like validating my feelings, and that like, right, I had my mind set on something and like I was really excited about it, and like it didn't go as planned, and so like validating those feelings of like, oh wow, like that sucks, like honestly like that sucks, that like I wanted to like, you know, have new experiences and like embrace my culture and like get better at Korean, because I don't know if you guys saw my video with Joycey, but obviously my Korean needs to get a little bit better. And so like all of that went out the door, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like I'm like in limbo. And so like that's like kind of like what I've been going through, but it's brought up these feelings of like, okay, how can I get creative, and how can like being here mean that this is what's meant to be, and like this is an opportunity for me to like continue expanding my network in LA, continuing to change and grow and develop this podcast, and like develop my friendships more. Like it's been like just a lot of like adjusting, but I think that the biggest thing that has been helpful in this is that I have like an open-mindedness and like an optimism that it's going to go as planned. Like maybe Korea didn't work out because of XYZ, or like, right, like zooming out big picture, like maybe there is just like a different path, like maybe it's not my time, right? And so I'm like pretty optimistic there are other opportunities for me to take advantage of while I'm here in Korea, or while I'm here and not in Korea. And so I think, yeah, the open-mindedness has been huge. And another thing that I found really helpful, and actually studies have shown that individuals can cope better with uncertainty when they have a strong sense of self and self-identity. And so I feel like, right, self-identity, self-worth, like self-love, like these are all words that are just being like tossed out. Like at the end of the day, I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Like I'm literally like, I don't know who the heck I am. Like I love to chameleon depending on who I'm around. I'm a people pleaser at heart. So like, what do you mean self-identity? Like, I know I'm funny, like that will always be the case, but like everyone knows that. So like, what else? What else besides my humor? Like, what do you want me for? And so what does that mean, right? If I like lose my job, how do I introduce myself? Like that's so scary, right? Joyce talked about this in her episode where she talks about getting laid off, and she's like, I don't know how to introduce myself anymore. Like I've always been like, hi, I'm Joyce, I work at blank. But like what happens when like that goes away? And obviously there are lots of people being laid off right now, and so maybe this is for those of you who are out there in the job market finding opportunities via LinkedIn and just getting rejection email after email. How do we build self-identity? I was actually listening to the 10% Happier podcast with Dan Harris, and he had on Maya Shankar, who also has a podcast about uncertainty and change. What do you know? And so something that she said that I think was so freaking profound is, instead of attaching our identities to a certain pursuit, try to attach your identity to the features of that pursuit. And so if that pursuit changes, you can still find another one with the same underlying features. And so literally, one more time for the people in the back. Instead of attaching our identities to a certain pursuit, try to attach your identity to the features of that pursuit. Right? Okay, so I'm a big example girly. I love to be like, can I get an example of that? So an example for y'all is, let's say I'm Hannah and I work for, this is a made up company called Alfalfa. let's say I'm so super proud of working at Alfalfa, and like it's one of the big major tech companies, and I get into the coolest parties and all this stuff. But and I'm used to introducing myself as like, "Oh, I'm Hannah, like I work at Alfalfa." What am I going to do when Alfalfa, this big huge tech company, has a 20% layoff and I'm a part of the 20%? Like, how do I go about and introduce myself? So, right, rather than identifying myself with that pursuit, with Alfalfa, it's identifying with the features of Alfalfa, meaning this is a company that values human connection. This is a company that values like moral integrity. And this is a company that values like fun and humor. I can go ahead and like find that in another company, or like maybe who knows, I'll found my own company, right? I'll go all GD bus on their ass and be like, yeah, I'm a girl boss. And so it makes sure that your identity is set in something that isn't so fickle and something that isn't like easily lost. It's like replaceable, right? Like kind of how I like to think about it is like, right? Whenever you're applying to jobs, people are always like, what are your transferable skills? And so, like, this is where the transferableness of your identity comes in, right? Like, you want to make sure that you are focused on the features of the pursuit rather than the pursuit itself, right? Even if, like, my goal is to be a mom, and like right now in this moment, like, I think I do want to be a mom, rather than being so focused on that identity of being a mom, because right, I think we have all experienced like empty nester syndrome, maybe, like it's that loss of like, what do I do after I poured like 18 years into a kid's life? Like, what do I do in my day to day, right? Like, who am I? Like, even when I see like people at church like get pregnant and whatnot, I feel like one of the main things that the mothers talk about, like the new mothers talk about, is like how their identity becomes like, oh, you're so and so's mom now. Like, people are more focused on the kids than you. And so I think there has to be a lot of like mental shifting, and just like flexibility in that sense, because life and plans and like circumstances are going to change. And so we have to like have the mindset of like flexibility in order to like respond to the change. And I think like, right, speaking of mindsets, one of the very interesting things that I found from Simon Sinek is that there are people, two camps. Camp one is people with an infinite mindset who embrace surprise and find opportunity in like changing circumstances, versus finite mindset. And those are the people who need to like exert control and like keep short time frames in order to make sure that they have this like sense of like they know of predictability and like what's gonna happen. So I think one of the main like aspirations could be to have this infinite mindset, right? This mindset that like we don't know what the night is gonna bring us. We don't know like who I'm gonna meet when I go out. We don't know like what's gonna happen if I like decide to move across the country, but there's opportunity in the new for us to just like grow and experience new things. I also love that every single podcast, every single article that I read on embracing change and uncertainty, they all talked about having a strong support system. And so this is a reminder that like you're not alone in all of this. I think that oftentimes I personally feel like when I'm like going through a tough time and like there's like just like lots of change and I just like feel like emotionally turbulent, that I like don't want to share with my friends, because I'm like, oh, like they already have so much shit going on. Like I don't want to like burden them with even more. But I think like this is where this idea of like boundaries comes in. Where like I would hope that you and your friends have emotional boundaries, so that like if a friend is like venting to you about their life, that you don't take on that burden as your own, that like you're there to listen and be supportive and like hopefully get you to a place where you know, like maybe we could be a little bit more like action oriented and like just focused on like what can we do, like what are next steps so that we can like help you out of this funk, right? And so I forgot the beginning of that sentence, but I feel like y'all get the point, right? Like surround yourself with people who you know you can like trust, or like hopefully maybe you could like build trust with them to eventually get to a place where you're able to be like vulnerable about the changes going on in your life. But yeah, like surround yourself with people who can either sympathize or empathize, right? Like I think more and more, you know, I'm seeing the beauty of sharing like life experience with people who are going through the same things as you, right? Because like they can empathize. But then there's also the people who can sympathize, right? They may not be going through the same things or have never in a million years will go through the same things, but they can offer a new perspective. And so in addition to like, right, having a supportive system of people that like have your back, I also think it's important to maybe have like a diversity in people who like have different perspectives, who don't think the same way as you, because I think it's like really easy to get like stuck in this one like train of thought, in this pattern of thought. And if like the people around you are just affirming, like maybe there's like a lack of like accountability and like responsibility that is being like done on like your end. I don't want to be surrounded by people who like just tell me what I want to hear all the time. Like I think it's so easy for people to like just go to the people who will tell them what they want to hear. Like I have so many recent examples of that where it's like, oh, you wanted to make that one decision, right? You wanted to make choice A, and so you went to the people who like would validate that decision of yours. When in reality, like, let's get a variety of perspectives in here. Like, let's have some range. You know what I mean? Like, it's so boring when people like don't have personalities or like opinions or thoughts like outside of themselves. Like, let's like get a little bit of like challenge on, because why are you scared to like hear a different opinion? Like, I don't know. I feel like this rant is like misdirected, but maybe we'll talk about that one day. But yeah, just like reaching out to your community. And I will say, like, I come into this conversation like knowing very much how beautiful my community is and like how grateful I am for my community, because it's taken a lot of years to build this, right? And like I'm also like so grateful that like I went to church at such a young age and like was able to like build this support system and like this foundation of girls that like really have my back. But also that like we always say, okay, so right, I have this group of 9 girlfriends. It's called IX, like, and we always say that like if we met today, we wouldn't all be friends. Like there's no freaking way that like we would have like became a group. But I think like that's for the better, because we are all so different, think so differently, and respond so differently, to the point where like if I go to the 8 other girls in the group, like, and ask them a simple question like A or B, right? Like true or false, I will literally get 8 different answers. And I love that, because like I would have never thought that way. And like I'm so thankful to be like exposed to a group of like strong women who are opinionated and like won't just tell me what I want to hear all the time. Also knowing that like sometimes, yeah, like your friends will affirm you, and I think that's really important. But maybe it's about like hearing the things that we don't want to hear all the time, and like treating ourselves like grown-ups a little bit. So yeah, I guess just like in conclusion, embrace the unknown. Like I think oh my god, actually, you know what the unknown is from? It's my high school calculus teacher, Mr. Kim. He was like literally the scariest person. Like would literally play the intro to Star Wars on test day every day. Like he was Pavlov's dogging us for sure. But he would do that, and the only phrase that I got out of that class was the unknown unknown. Like, he was like, you don't know what you don't know. And so I think that can be one of the scariest parts. But just like going into things like with an open heart and open mind, and like, right, like maybe working on telling yourself that like you are good at change, and like you're capable, and like you're strong enough to handle what life throws at you. I think like this episode is about mindset, and this episode is about making sure that we have a strong sense of identity in not the actual pursuit, but the features of the pursuit, right? Having a strong sense of identity outside of fickle things. And so, yeah, I think is that it for this episode? I think that might be it. Thank you guys so much for joining for our second little car sesh, and I will see you guys in the next one. But in the meantime, you guys should follow me on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. The podcast is bulgogi.podcast. And yeah, I'm doing this new little series with Joycey, and like, guys, I'm literally being flamed on the internet for how bad my Korean is. So that's been really exciting and fun, because literally today at church, like so many of my friends were like, "Kudamun." But like, guys, it's not kudamun, it's kuryaman. I don't even know if that's right. Anyways, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, go check out the reels. I'm doing another Get Ready With Me with Joycey. So yeah, other than that, you can find me on HANAKATT. And oh, give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I haven't asked you guys to do that in a while. But also only give us a rating if you have good things to say, because like literally if you're gonna say something bad, then like just say it directly to my face. Like, fight me. Okay, bye.